Testing, testing, testing. Hey, Anna. Good morning. Hey, Doug.
Good morning. Good morning. Guess I'll give it another minute or two.
Hey, Tammy.
Hi, Tammy.
So, Tammy, I think you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
My audio is working now. Awesome. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. I forgot to get my water bottle, so give me about 1 minute. I'm going to get some water bottle.
How are you, Anna? Hi, Glenn.
Did you say something, Tammy? Hi, Glenn.
Oh, I just said, how are you, Anna?
Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Doug, how are you?
I'm good. Just have to center up for this.
Yeah.
I've been planting trees, fruit trees,
Where?
in my garden.
Ah, you have a nice garden?
No, it's just a wild bit of land that I've somehow managed to get the ground manager to let me use. And it's full of rocks and old trees that have fallen down, and it's not very big, but I love it. It's my bit of open air outside, which is great.
Hi, Deborah.
Good to see you.
How many trees did you plant and what kind?
A Victoria plum, a green gage, and a damson. And I've ordered a Bramley apple and some blueberry bushes.
Yes, building for the future in a very grounded way. Yeah, the light's still coming in my part of the world. You look pretty bright there, Sam, but we're dark here in Vancouver.
Yeah, the sun's already up, and I've been up since about 5 o'clock. Raring.
How are you, Deborah? You're muted.
There we go. That'll work. Glenn messaged me, so I just woke up, so.
Okay, so we're at 5 after, and we'll kick off. So I just want to restate sort of the theme as a loosely constructed meme here, which is when people come together to converse and exchange and share and collaborate and do all that good stuff. There do exist in the nature of human beings things that we refer to shorthand as buttons. Sometimes they're unconscious, and sometimes they're conscious. And they have a way of getting pressed along the way as a phenomena of the natural order. And so this is about inquiry into that, into that occurrence. And it is just to sort of really try to calibrate. It's in the spirit of how do we recognize that phenomena collectively in relation to the individual whose button has been pushed, and how do we explore both what that's about, what the value set and frame is of the collective in service to the individual who experiences that, because it's a generally instantaneous transition into feeling and reactivity from an emotionally driven place. And how do we honor and respect it? How do we respond to it? And how do we do that differently, and how do we do that better in service to realizing the vision that we would hold for how we work and play together going forward? Excuse me. So bear with me one sec, because I've got somebody tapping on the glass. Okay, sorry about that. So the theme for today, which was actually an outgrowth and inspiration courtesy of Sam from, I think it might have been Tuesday, but these sessions are beginning to meld and blend into each other. So it's just out of the river and flow of it all. But it has to do with the idea of when an individual has an attachment, an add-in, a thing that they're sort of carrying with them that involves a need and an imperative and a desire to share and to show and tell and to get acknowledgement and response and sign on. And the dynamic of that, as whether consciously or unconsciously, and I think often unconsciously, the dynamic of that as a push phenomena as opposed to a pull phenomena, where the collective is saying, can you tell me more? It's more a matter of the individual having a voice in their head that's saying, gotta tell. So that phenomena is what I'd love us to sort of look at and explore a bit. And what I'd like to ask of each person is, if you have one of those, could you leave it behind? What would it be? And could you leave it behind going into this conversation in service to 100% presence and connection, and in service to coming from inquiry and curiosity. And who wants to go last?
Well, I'll jump into the first place. How about that?
That works.
So I would like to just put it into our pool of meaning. Doug and I did a session maybe a month ago. It was the second part of the 3-part Discovery podcasts. And this is, something, a space that I could share my stuff. And when I did, I really didn't feel like I was able to fully share. So I'm just expressing that I've also had that experience, with Doug, where I did my best to share my pieces, but the day wasn't perfect for me. And, I had barriers at times in clearly articulating my work. And it really affected me afterwards. And it's a piece. I'm just exploring that space from the inside of, this great need to share, having created the space and a willing participant to hear and listen. And then, not feeling like I was able to do that in the way that I wanted to. So, and this is my passion, man. This is what I've been building towards. So if it were as easy as just doing it, it would be done. Doug, I'm just so grateful. I just want to put this out there that Doug over the last few weeks has been helping me with both a couple of proposals for a local organization here in Vancouver that we got done, and it was amazing. And in the course of that, a bunch of my shit came up, and Doug really helped me to midwife through some of my own inner blocks. And there's inner places where I was blaming myself for not doing it right. And so I've made a shift there, and it has been, I feel different. I feel like I have transformed something in myself by being able to reframe that piece of not doing it right. And we're in a place where we don't know exactly how we hold space for each other to share, and then step up into that sharing in a way that can really be received by others. So I just wanted to really thank you in the group publicly, Doug, for walking me through all of those places and spaces and helping to transform those very real challenges that are part of unblocking so our work can really flow together. So thank you.
I can go. I have to admit, Doug, that when you presented that possibility, it had a phenomenal effect on me, because I was expecting you to say, so let's share these things that we are holding. And I was all ready to do that. And then you said, no, leave it at the door. And I just felt, God, totally naked. Like, so who am I? And I guess that was the intended effect of what you were saying. So I can only say that it had that effect on me. I have no idea where it's going to go. But I feel bereft without my whatever it is, you know, my baby, my thing, my uniform, or my, you know, the thing by which I recognize myself to be this person. Over.
I'll go. If I leave behind that which I have attachment for, and I leave it at the door, I feel completely free to not have to say anything, and I'm just listening.
Yeah, I also feel a little like that. That I'm free to just listen in if I can just leave everything at the door, and that is a good feeling. It's, just be ready for whatever may come up, and it's sort of so much in the back of the mind which I may want to share, so it's not possible to share all of it at once anyway. So, but it's good to just let it be in the back of the mind, and then here I am and listening in, and we're looking into different subjects which are connected internally, and something interesting will come up. So it feels like freedom.
All right, I guess I'm last. But I think I'm going to echo everybody, what everyone just said. I've had the same experience of Tammy, where I've had something burning. I put it out there as best I could with the what I could do, and then nothing, and I didn't feel validated. And I feel like Anna, where when you get attached to these things, you put it across yourself, and it becomes your mask, your ego, your thing that you present to the world. And when you get asked to leave it at the door, you totally feel naked. But then I feel like Sam and Glenn, I feel completely free to just float on this space between us. And then I feel like a sponge. And then I think it allows curiosity to arise. And then I think that creates the glue. And I keep feeling like I just need to understand, and I can't understand if I'm speaking. So to float and to absorb can maybe, like Tammy says, that allows entrance for transformation, so that when you try it again, put yourself out there, maybe you can articulate in a new way that you weren't able to do before, and that's the process of transformation. So that's mine.
So, thought came to me. Seems like you could share with attachment, which I think is something you're flagging, Doug. I think it's also possible to share without attachment. It's also possible to listen with attachment, which probably most lurkers are doing. And it's also possible to listen without attachment. And then let me throw in one more dimension, which is the people who are listening, the audience. Because it is possible to say, I'm interacting with the 5 of you. It's also possible to say, I'm interacting with the 5 of you plus, meaning those who would view this video afterward. So not all of anything I say has an attachment to an immediate response. I might actually have an attachment to a subsequent response. Or I may have no attachment at all, but just putting it out there for some possible response either now or later. So I just want to bring in those different dimensions of looking at the way attachment or non-attachment happens when we offer something. Over.
So I just want to sort of harvest a minute because it's my frame was very much sort of the binary of somebody with attachment relative to the collective versus somebody coming without attachment relative to the collective. Tammy zoomed in, which I think is really a whole nother sort of layer and facet, right? Which is the individual's relationship to their internal attachment. It's sort of the binary self. There's the me with my attachment, and there's the me without my attachment, and the internal wrestle and struggle between one and the other and who wins. And so add on top of that, at least as it relates to the collective experience of somebody with attachment, how good are they or not at expressing and conveying and promoting that which they're attached to. Which is it's sort of like add another dimension, right? And it's yin and yang, because there's the internal of that for the individual, which has nothing to do with the rest of the people. Like, it's a completely inside job. And then there's the external sort of energy and experience of that individual's sharing or not. And what either qualitatively improves or diminishes the value of the sharing from a collective experience standpoint as audience, right? So what are the modalities of sharing that are in service to and enhance the power and value of the individual's contribution to the collective, and vice versa, right? Whole nother dimension. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
Hey, Carl.
So, Carl, if you want a reference, frame of reference, I can do that, or you can just sort of jump into the water as we flow and see what happens. I leave that up to you. If you want to ask, though, I'd be happy to help sort of try to locate things.
No, that's okay. I know I'm late, so not sure how long I can stay on. I got a paper due tonight.
Okay, no worries. So anyway, this just got a lot deeper and richer than at least in my, the frame of my intention, I had any idea about. And I'm complete. Anna, could you share more? I'm just really curious. Could you sort of share more about the loss dimension of what you shared about letting go of what you you thought you were about to bring? And by the way, I didn't mean to disrupt that or throw a curve. That wasn't intentional.
Well, I was just at that moment now thinking about it's who am I without my story, really, which is lovely. I mean, I do, I appreciate what Glenn and Sam both said. about how it frees you up. It's yeah, it puts me back really in touch, a deeper in touch with me. Just connecting me to me. So that loss, yeah, the loss of sort of familiarity and knowing what path I'm on, and, you know, the direction that I'm going, and what my opinions are, and all of that. And instead, just really being here now. That I just find that a huge challenge. As well as having this element of, wow, I could fly, I could dance, I could, you know, that feeling of freedom with it as well, nothing holding me down. So it is also really beautiful.
Just building on what Anna just said, I think when we're able to let go of our own individual perceptions and ideas, we allow the group to help lift us up higher. The possibility for what you just said, Anna, this idea that there's nothing holding me down, and I can fly, I can dance, I can be something I hadn't even perceived in the moment previous to this moment. And that is a really powerful, beautiful moment to get to. And how do we generate that within this collective, this net that we're forming, so that everyone feels that and has that safe space and trust, and that we learn to understand each of our specialties. Like maybe we're forming an animal or a shape in this collaborative, and some of us are good in the head, some of us are good in the heart, some of us are the backbone, the structure, some of us are the feet that are taking us there, some of us maybe the wings, and so we're trying to find where we all fit in this structure we're creating, this collaborative net. But we don't see, like, it's six blind in the elephant. Like, we don't see where we are all the time. Like, some of us are stuck in the tail, or some of us are stuck at the feet. And there's this image Neil had posted yesterday on Facebook, and it was just his dog. I'm going to ask him to repost it in our group, but it was just his dog standing inside his fence, and someone was coming in with the headlights on, and it was casting these shadows over his dog. And I actually thought it was a goat. So I said something. I made a comment in this is his individual feed, and I said, this seems to me like what we're doing in our group. But there are these shadows that get cast, and we can't see the whole thing. And imagine the beams of light, like, are up our consciousness. This is what we're conscious of. But the shadows are our shadow, our personal shadow and our collective shadow. And so we're constantly oscillating up and down. And I think when we go down, it's natural. I think it's a natural thing that our consciousness does. But when we go down, it's shadow, it's dark, it's black. And we don't always see what's there. And I think our ego tends to take over in those points when we go under, until we come back up again, and we have the light of consciousness shining in what we're able to see. So I made the mistake thinking this image in the picture he showed was a goat, and it was really a dog. and maybe that's what we're doing here. We're trying to figure out what we're creating. Do we have a goat? Do we have a dog? Do we have an angel? Do we have a bird? You know, like, what is it? And we're trying to navigate the natural ebb and flow of consciousness. And we need to deal with our own personal shadows and our group shadow to figure out what we're making. So I guess that's me.
That was awesome. That was just freaking awesome. I love that. And by the way, like consistently, that's what you bring. So I just want to acknowledge also, like, that's part of your gift here. And you keep doing it sort of consistently. And I want to pick up on something in that because I think it sort of lies at the heart of my fixation, which is that if the we space that we generate is a result of our collective individual contributions, and you take out the additives, you take out the me plus whatever the thing is, my hobby horse, I believe that there's a meta layer of us clean, just literally as a group of human beings with our common beingness, what we all share, we all experience, we all understand and bring as a collective reality. And then all that other stuff is on, you know, can get added in on top or stirred in. But those things are not the same as us. And my feeling and my sort of faith and source of belief and optimism in our ability to save ourselves is that human being layer without any add-ins is a common denominator that our species has. And if we can figure out how to reconnect on that level as the first step and the first layer and the first priority and the important foundational sort of cornerstone or bedrock, and figure out how to make it safe and how to enable that to happen exponentially, globally, then the add-ins are all sort of value add. They're all sort of like pluses. But if everybody is connected on the human level, that's sort of the source of our generativity, of our potential generativity, on all the levels and ways that we can generate. And it's sort of the battery. It's sort of where the energy comes from. And that each person, I think it's really important where you started, each person brings by their own measure and portion what they have to bring. And everybody doesn't have to bring everything. Everybody doesn't have to understand everything. Everybody doesn't have to even understand or acknowledge or connect with everything in terms of the add-in layer. It's, can we as human beings embrace the diversity of what everybody brings individually, whatever it is, and recognize it as value and contributive to the mission, even if we can't get our arms around what the mission is, like even if we don't know what's emerging, what's being enacted. But we have faith that if everybody's bringing what they have to bring, collectively we can solve this. We can fix our way of being and doing in the world and heal our planet.
For me, that speaks to a sort of, what I'm feeling at the moment is that the defensiveness with which I came into the session, quite unconsciously, really, has diminished. And I'm now feeling much more part of the group, feeling more open. I think it was like Deborah said, more curious, more open to, yeah, because I also interpret or assume or project that defensiveness onto everybody. So I see everybody as being defensive. So I'm sort of, I've already erected a barrier to hearing people. And somehow what you're saying is allowing that barrier to dissolve, because it's sort of taking us onto, like you said, a layer, a universal layer, where we can connect without those barriers. Yeah. Over.
I also feel that there's a realness to this. There's whatever comes up, whatever someone says, whatever reactions I have to it, there's a reality to it. It's actually happening. And that's big for me.
Can you say more, Glenn?
Like the reactions that I have, they may be the results of all kinds of things that have happened in the past and happening around us. As will be the reactions of all people and how we speak and how it comes across and how all of it mixes together, which is very complex and rich, and we're learning more about it. And sometimes there are these reactions of defensiveness or opposition or fear or just sort of maybe a restlessness, or I mean, it's a whole spectrum of reactions which can come up, especially when we're talking about very big, basic existential questions of the future that we all care about. And yet, around all of this, there's a sort of direct reality to it. So there's a reality to what is happening now in the world, what is happening now in my mind, what is happening here in this room, and everything which plays out is actually real. It's as real as anything. And in that sense, it demands respect in itself, as it is. The reality that I experience, the reality we experience, what actually happens. It's something which is inherently interesting. And also, if we can have this agility and ability to learn and listen what we're trying to do, there's always something we can learn from it. There's some way we can grow. There's some way we can use it, so that nothing needs to be wasted. And I feel if I can find that attitude a little more, then that might be a different way of approaching these obstacles and buttons and also the painful things which come up. For me at least, that's a relief to just remember that there's a reality to it and there's something to learn from it, and this is the cards we have. I mean, these are the cards we gotta play anyway, so.
I'll just add to what Glenn said. I have this drawing I drew, very much related to what Glenn just did. I'll find it and I'll post it. But I call it the edge of reality. It's like, imagine you're running on top of the yin and yang ball. So you have the darkness and you have the light, and they're constantly, I don't know, I see them as falling into each other, and our job is to stay at this edge. And if we can stay at the edge where the yin and the yang are falling into each other, that's where the golden light is of consciousness. And it's our job to try to just stay there in perfect balance and not fall into the darkness or get burned up by the light. Either one can be dangerous if you just dwell on the opposite side. So I love what Glenn just said, because it reminds me of running on the ball of reality, or staying on the edge of reality. So that's
I just want to come back to something that you said, Deborah, about the shadows, about being sort of in the darkness. And because it feels like actually what Glenn is saying, and you're saying now, you know, that there is a reality to these things. I mean, shadow has that ambiguity, doesn't it? Because it isn't really real, but it is real. And, you know, I think sometimes we talk about the ego as though it's something that we should somehow avoid or manage without, or that it's sort of part of the darkness, and that we need to come into the light. I mean, the yin yang thing is really that they're both equal in some sense. You know, the darkness and the light, they're both real, just like Glenn was saying. So, I mean, you're saying it too.
And I would say with the ego, we absolutely have to have an ego to exist in this world. And it feels like we need, and the ego is informed by the dark, our shadow, as well as our light, our higher consciousness. And it's allowing the flow of consciousness to move through the ego, so that there's balance, I think. But I think we would be torn apart in this world if we don't have a healthy ego. And I think maybe we're learning how to create or help each other create healthy egos, so that more, like Tammy has said before, getting more bandwidth of consciousness into ourselves and into how we perceive our life. But the shadow is deep in all of us, and it often pops up in completely unexpected places. And I can see a lot of my reality that I'm dealing with now, the painful stuff, is due to my unconscious choices, even though I thought I was fully conscious at the time. But I'm paying the price right now. And I really wish that I had been able to get more consciousness earlier so that it wasn't such a big price at this moment, but I'm willing to pay it. So, the payoff of maybe possibly make it through I keep saying the eye of the needle, is worth the price. I will pay it because I made it. So.
I really love what's happening right now. And it feels like when we're able to leave some stuff behind, that there is more space for us to weave what's between us. And I'm just feeling a freedom in how we're sharing right now that I've been yearning for. And I consistently sense that we're feeling around in the dark, right? And how is it that we do really be able to receive each other and have enough space to do that? And it is a really interesting internal exploration. And I'm just so grateful to be able to do this together so that we can practice how we can weave our thoughts and hearts and work and ideas and come to a deeper understanding together. Like this is the gold that I know is here, that needs willing participants to show up and find out how to do that better. But leaving big chunks of our stuff behind, it does feel different too. And I don't know how well I'm able to do it. I'm still putting pieces together with what I'm thinking, but step by step. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about in terms of being really present and leaving all that stuff behind is to experience the moment as fresh with any possibility. Anything we want to create, we can create right here, right now.
That's that for me, that's that emergent piece. This is the place from which anything can happen and anything can emerge. And creating the possibility, the opportunity. And I just want to compare, contrast, distinguish something, because I think there's a real difference in what we are doing here. And there's a temptation, I think there's a temptation for, different folks and different camps and different judgments and beliefs to find lack of focus, lack of direction, lack of plan, lack of framework, lack of output, lack of whatever. That, and to put this into, sort of familiar boxes of, so this is Stormin Norman Foreman, or this is this, or this is that, and all the sort of epistemologies and pre-existing analytical reductionist contextualizations that, have been developed and built up over, 100 years to describe this or to name it or to frame, from whether it's academic or judgmental or intellectual or whatever. And there's also, I think, a major difference between this, experientially for me, and the universe of the sort of spiritual development movement and world, which I find tends to me to be sort of more narcissistic. It's like, I am interested in my spiritual development. What level am I achieving? What, what stripes or credentials or brownie points have I racked up in my awakening? And what color am I? Or what spiral am I on? Or what letters? It's this whole epistemological confection that defines my level of spiritual being on an aspirational and implicitly competitive, even though none of them will ever say that, scale of judgment. This is about us, to Glenn's point, in reality, in the concrete, in service to the GCC vision mission, in service to a common desire that every single person holds to transform our world, contribute to making it better on a core, heartfelt level, and maps to all sorts of concrete, tangible, and intangible expressions, insights, knowledge, techniques, practices, all of the things that will contribute and result in that transformation. This is real. This is very concrete. But it is the we in it as an aggregate, code-generated reality are different. And we're giving it the time. And we're owning and acknowledging a commitment. Sam, you're at the point back when you said, I'm not leaving. And the fact that we're not leaving, I think, core resolve, at least for me, I experience as growing, as really, really substantial. It's inconceivable to me to not continue this path with everybody. So I just wanted to share those thoughts because, the universe around us rages with attempts to sort of either negate it or challenge it or dismiss it. And how to respond to those people is also part of the challenge. I'm complete there.
I think when we talk about spiritual paths, I believe that we all go in different ways. And I was bothered by something you said, Doug, earlier, which is I took as a condescension of the way various others have laid out stages or paths or stripes or colors or letters. There are reasons people do various different things, and it's not necessary to judge that. I felt a lot of that personally, and that bothered me.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't coming from a place of judgment in that, in the framing of that. I have a huge amount of respect for all of those modalities and offerings, and for those for whom they find value and they find growth and they find, what they want or need or serves them. So I don't say any of that with judgment. My framing, contextualizing it the way I did, is in distinguishing, there's an internal consequence to this experience that is different than a lot of that. It's more the distinction of there's a difference in it, and I don't know that I could define or describe what that difference is. But it's sort of like without any editorial or epistemological or linguistic or other add-ins. It's just is. So no judgment intended or dismissal or disrespect of any of those things. I have huge respect for all of that work and those insights.
Your audio dropped out for a second, but I see Anna's got her hand up as well.
Well, I just wanted to agree with Sam, actually, that there was some sort of feeling of condescension in there. I didn't pick it up totally, and I just have to, when Sam pointed it out, I could feel it. But you were making a distinction, which I think is really important. And what you mentioned was the competitiveness, which can be part of those different colors and stages and states and so on. But yeah, it was there, I think.
Making anything specific is of, it means that something else isn't true. And that's really interesting with how when we make a point, we're necessarily making something specific that can't actually be reduced to that. And there's a lot that hangs on that as how we understand it ourselves. Again, to triggers, to buttons of how, when we're expressing anything. Because if I feel into what you said, Doug, yes, there was a feeling of, yes, not that. We are not that. So, there's an othering. But how do you make a distinction without a value judgment that does othering? I don't think that was your intention. I'm just, you've stated clearly that wasn't your intention. But I think it is a danger in making anything specific. That, what's the saying when you point your finger, there's always three pointing back at you or something?
I'm trying to get beyond the specific comments made. As I've been working with my story, I love to go down to this creek. It's just a small creek near my house, and I love to watch the water. And in the process of watching the water, I keep thinking that the water is like consciousness flowing. And last year, around this time when there was the women's movement, the march, I went down, I interviewed 35 people. There was this tremendous energy, in opposition to the other, which was the Republicans winning and Trump getting elected as our president. Huge, huge energy. And you could go, especially in Washington, D.C., you could just, oh my God, it was just this amazing presence of energy. You didn't even have to walk very far to just feel it. But within several months, I could see that energy fracturing. Some of the trails were going off into these groups that were forming called the Women's March groups. Some of it was going off into these groups called the individual groups. Some of it was going off into very unconscious currents called like the Idiocracy of Donald Trump's America, which had 77,000 members. So there's a lot of people that want to go in that current, but it's very unconscious comments and people get really quite low. but then there's other groups trying to do higher things. And so I could feel this, again, within 3 months of the march, I could feel this fracturing of this tremendous current of energy that had been triggered by Donald Trump. And so then I go down to the river and I'm watching, because I'm thinking this whole world is kind of like a metaphor for consciousness. And I'm thinking, well, how do the rocks fit into this world? If I'm looking at the stream and this is all consciousness, how do the rocks fit in there? And I'm like, when I start to sense this thing happen, I'm like, that's how the rocks fit in. It's consciousness freezing. It's consciousness hardening. It's consciousness becoming rigid and it's like, this is mine. I'm the women's group. This is mine. This is how I do. And I could see groups having to fracture off because there was like this women's march group in London and they're like, nope, we're not going to go that way. So they had to rename their name, and I saw it fracturing in the individual groups. It's like they did, I don't know, conflict, division, and they fracture off. And I think you can even see it, like I come from the Christian tradition and I'm Lutheran, and Martin Luther fractured off with Catholic, so it's natural to have this fracturing of energy, I guess. It's the only way to explain it. And then if you look at geology, you see the fragments of fractured attempts to define things. You go back in archaeology, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians. We are standing on our attempts to bring into reality, like Glenn says, consciousness. And we've built amazing cathedrals, we've built amazing civilizations, we've built amazing spiritual practices. But in the process of building, we have to go from fluid to rock or ice or hardness. And in the process, that's where we start to divide. There becomes me and other. So anyways, that's my abstract thought.
So I wonder, does Carl have anything to say about this? If he was going to leave a little earlier, or some comments or questions, I would love to hear that. If you have anything.
Well, I've got my semester just starting as a PhD student here, so the sense making and some connections I see, like I'm getting ready to post a link. I found like a 3D yin yang thing that might be what you were that's what came to mind with your talk there. And then last year there's the Koji tribe there in Colombia. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the documentary, the BBC documentaries, but there was one, The Heart of the World, Message from the Heart of the World, and then a Luna, and they're they basically consider themselves the stewards of the planet, and they refer to themselves as the rest of us basically as little brother and things. But it's just interesting. Their message is basically, we don't have to give up our life styles necessarily, but it's about well, the core thing is protecting the rivers and things. I mean, it's like the rivers are like the veins, and Luna is a living being.
Carl, is this a tribe in South America?
Yes, in Colombia.
Do they have the myth of the condor and the eagle?
I don't think so. It's yeah, I'll post a link to the.
Yeah, I'd love to read more of that.
Just a little question that came to me to all of you about this. Do you also have the impression that this theme of othering and the tendency to think in groups and out groups and identify with certain groups and also personally identify with certain theories and ways of thinking, which is a lot of the rocks in the river, so to say, which we've elaborated on, is there emerging a new kind of meta consciousness about this tendency, our culture? Because I feel that this is being understood much more now than before. That the pattern itself of identifying with a certain group and going into that game and then getting the out groups and the us-them constellations with the typical tendencies, it seems that this pattern is sort of being revealed in culture, and that we're learning more about it, humanity in general. And maybe that's a part of the path of moving beyond it. That's just a question that came to me about this.
Glenn, yes, absolutely. The pattern is being revealed. That that is the imagery, and I don't know, others should speak to this too, but I see like if the globe has, like, the rivers are patterns, or we have consciousness is like weather on the planet. We just don't see it, and weather has patterns, and each of us has like a resonance, you know, as we go up and down and up and down. We have our stories, we have our experiences, we have our bodies of knowledge, and this becomes our pattern that we're contributing to the global conscious pattern, the weather pattern. But I think it can be regionalized, it can be with different spiritual practice, different cultural practices. Something has fractured our patterns to destructive levels. And many of us are rocking, you know, in great pain, in great unconsciousness. But I think you're absolutely right. The pattern, this tendency is entirely natural. We are by nature attracted to patterns. We need them to survive. But can we make more conscious patterns, maybe? I don't know. But I would be interested in others.
I think this is actually what is seen as the breakdown of society. And you could also see it as the breakthrough of society, because these patterns have really, as you said, the rocks have become very rigid and frozen. And those patterns which like binary sexuality or gender, which is being questioned now in a way that it never, or in a way that one couldn't do openly before. And in England, I don't know what's happening in America, but in England, children as 10 are being given information about whether they want to choose what their gender is at that age. They can choose. This is absolutely mind-blowing for me, because gender is really one of the basic patterns, you could say, that we conform to, you know, right from the word go, blue and pink, you know. So I think everything is up for grabs at the moment. The family, all the traditions that we have taken for granted. Yeah.
Anna, that is amazing, because I'm reading Jung and Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, and Jung says this. He talks a lot about the first break. The first, if yin and yang was once whole, and there was no division between black and white, he says when he studied ancient cultures, the first division most primitive cultures recognize is the division between man and woman. That is the first universal division that he said was recognizable between cultures, modern and primitive. And from there, many other divisions emerge. So that's really amazing what you say about how, I haven't been watching that as much, but it is happening here in America too, this fluid sexuality. But it's meeting lots of opposition because of consciousness that Trump represents, that is very, very vivid here in America. So.
No, it was meeting opposition before. I don't know whether Trump has particularly, you know, dramatized that particularly. There is a lot of opposition to people being able to choose gender they are. I mean, you know, we were brought up in a certain way, and for us to let go of that is incredibly difficult. And the whole thing that's happening about toilets and whether you use the male or the female, or whether they have to provide something. I mean, there are practical situations as well that this all speaks to. And, you know, in a sense, it is a breakdown of what we've come to believe was eternal. Like you say, Jung saw it as the fundamental division between male and female. You couldn't question that. That was the fundamental division. And it is no longer the case. Jung was living at a different time. He is not up to date. That's all I have to say.
I actually never thought about this quite this way, Anna, before you mentioned it, that this issue of can we define our own gender, that is, it's an example of how these really deep identities are suddenly being proposed to reinvent for us to have the opportunity of reinventing it. And I've also seen a lot of the opposition, but the interesting thing is that the opposition is mostly an opposition towards going into some kind of fantasy world where one ignores physical realities and the fact that people are by nature genetically having certain qualities from the beginning which are relatively stable all through life. And that's the primary argument that I've heard several times. And so maybe it's sort of speaking past each other a little bit because nobody seems to disagree with that. But that doesn't change the fact that just to finish, I just want to say that even if we say that there are obviously physical differences between men and women, between different people, between people who are born different places, different times, which seems quite trivial, that doesn't change at all the fact that there's also the opportunity to redefine what this means, to redefine what it means on an identity level. And that's the question of gender, which is being proposed. What does this actually mean psychologically? And it's proposed that we can reinvent that. And that is not in any way in conflict with the reality that people are physically born different, with different tendencies. They are totally compatible. And that's very interesting. So it's a big question, but as far as I can tell, they're talking right past each other. But I hadn't thought about it before you said, Anna, that it's actually a good example of how, yeah, everything is up for grabs, as you say. That it's a new thinking of being ready to really redefine our human identity on a very deep level, and we didn't have those conversations before.
So, Glenn, just to question that assumption that you've described, which is that we are born different with different tendencies, my feeling is we just don't know yet, because we have a culture which has emphasized certain tendencies, and we don't know how much they are biologically determined, or how flexible or how adaptable they are or can be. Yeah, what you said about we have the opportunity now to explore that, and that's a great gift, actually.
Yeah, we don't know how we could move beyond it, or what it could mean. So could we say it that way, that yeah, there's differences in the sense that we have a different starting point, but that doesn't change the fact that we actually don't know what it means and what could come out of it. That's what I hear you say.
Even that assumption that we have a different starting point is questionable. We just don't know.
Well, they would say that obviously men and women are different, and that's trivial. Many people make a strong point of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, Anna, I don't understand the point you were just making, because I think what Glenn, in my understanding, was making the point for was that chromosomes are different. So there is a physical and biological difference. So I think Glenn was introducing the possibility that, we can choose behavior associated with gender across a spectrum. But the starting point that I think Glenn was referring to are the chromosomal structures. Right, Glenn? So if that is the starting point, to me, is that even disputable? To me, it doesn't look disputable. Over.
But we don't know, Sam, what those chromosomes, how they get expressed. Glenn was talking about we have certain tendencies as a result of those differences. I'm saying we don't know what those tendencies, we've assumed that there are male tendencies and female tendencies. I think that is all questionable at the moment.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I agree that it's worthy of question, but I think we also have a lot of evidence that correlates some of that behavior. Now, you could argue that it's, socially constrained and socially normed to become that way, but we do have a lot of data. So, I think it's worth looking at as a question. But I think what I was just struck by was Glenn made a statement that there are certain very distinct starting points. And to me, that distinction of starting point was what I was wondering whether you were disputing, because to me, it just looked indisputable.
I am questioning that, yeah.
And I think that's the point, right? Is that, for example, so we're in the social construct and the meme of what, you know, has been a series of traditions around different cultural expressions all around the world. The indigenous people of America recognize 5 genders: male, female, two-spirit female, two-spirit male, and transgendered. So in terms of the cosmology of being, there are ancient cultures that recognized a diversity of presentation, identity, and experience in terms of gender. And while ever certainly we can point to science, the presentation of consciousness and identity is a much softer science that is responsive to the overarching social and cultural means that we are present in. And so I think it is all up for questioning and transformation and a reconsideration according to more ancient ways of knowing and being that can feed into, again, sort of leaving some of these fundamental core assumptions aside and then seeing what is present in this space as we recognize that not each of us holds the final answer, but from within a tapestry, we have a deeper understanding of what we're actually talking about.
Hi, Gertrude.
Hi, Gertrude. Thanks for joining.
So Tammy, I think I would be excited by that because I think, you know, speaking for myself, there were some behaviors that were certainly, I felt, imposed on me strictly because I had a penis that I didn't necessarily feel like I had to take on, you know? I couldn't try out for certain things, but I had to try out for these other things. I had to wear certain clothes, I couldn't wear those other clothes. It had nothing to do with personal choice. They were just, you know, oh, well, you're going to have less trouble at school if you do it this way. So I think from an integrated standpoint, if we're able to take, you know, whatever we choose as our mini superpowers from the entire spectrum of possibilities, and then construct ourselves from that in a Nietzschean sense also, then I think that's exciting. Without limitation, without shame, you know, without prescription, without constraint. Over.
I'll just add to what Tammy's, everyone's saying. I've been writing about how we as human beings inherit genetic streams. So that's our biology, our DNA, that's what makes us all unique and different. But we also inherit psychic streams. And the psychic streams are invisible. Usually we don't usually see them, but that's coming from us through our family. And some families perpetuate trauma, and they break psyches as they're coming new into the world. And some families strengthen the individual so that they can become wholer and more creative. And then you have the cultural thing in streams imposing on the family streams that then impose on the individual. This is all psychic energy that I guess it's concentric circles, and they're all feeding into all of us all the time, and we're all being bombarded by many different things. And I think the psychic streams can influence the genetic streams and vice versa. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but.
Actually, Deb, you're not wrong if Bruce Lipton is correct. So that's good work to reference in this particular stream as well. That existence and belief alters genetic structure.
Yeah, I think even the hard-headed materialists have long gone away from this dualism between culture and genetics. I've been reading this book, From Bacteria to Bach and Back by Dan Dennett, and he's supposed to be this real hard-headed scientific materialist, and he actually talks about a global, emerging, invisible super intelligence that is far beyond each human being's capacity, and that there is an evolution within evolution which is accelerating, and where we're at the emerging edge of it through our personal choices. So that sounds pretty spiritual to me. And he's supposed to be this total hard-headed materialist. And he doesn't even speak about the higher levels of consciousness. But it's actually really fantastic to just see how incredibly advanced the so-called primitive levels of consciousness actually is. And that's some of the beauty of his work, as far as I can know, because he really shows how much more richness is in these what we call material, physical life forms. It's actually whole worlds within worlds within worlds, and somehow his work actually really illustrates that. And I just find that very interesting. That seems to be yet another example of one of those classical dichotomies, which is just collapsing totally between mind and matter. And Bruce Lipton and Dan Dennett, I mean, it's big similarities. I don't know so much about Bruce Lipton, by the way, but I've read a little bit about it. And it seems that that's a commonality, that this dualism of mind and matter is just totally collapsing all over.
Lynn, can you put the book into the chat? Can you? Would be great.
Yeah, what Glenn stimulated in me was a thought that of all the spiritual, quote unquote, insights that people get, I'm particularly fascinated by the ones from renowned scientists. You know, people like Richard Dawkins, Albert Einstein, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Nassim Haramein,
Feynman,
Carl Sagan, Richard Feynman. Yeah, all these guys, you know, they have very, very insightful takes on reality and philosophy and the universe and spirituality. And I think that those are really interesting when you meld them again with the more traditional schools of philosophy or spiritual thought. And how, if you look at them in toto, they really converge on really similar themes that then are recognizable if you go back to ancient texts, ancient teachings. And I think particularly what that toroid, sorry, Anna, you said?
Can you give an example? That's all I was saying.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of the whole yin yang, the whole energy flow, the whole balance idea, the whole structure, unstructured, the whole entropy versus non-entropy, the consciousness versus non-consciousness, all of those ideas are reflected in ancient teachings. For example, the Tao is one I would point to, okay? And yes, we could get into a long conversation about that, but yeah, the more insight you get into each of these areas, you know, quantum physics, or, you know, just what's going on with DNA understanding, or cell behavior with Bruce Lipton, it really does indicate that the fundamental truths have been known for quite a while. Which again, you know, brings me back to unlearning a lot of what we've learned the last 200 or 300 years, and not necessarily having to reinvent a bunch anew. It's possibly just rediscovering. Over.
You know, another dimension of all of those folks you listed and their contributions is that all of them, at one point along their path, recognized that for all they knew nothing. That, you know, for all of the discoveries and insights and all of their brilliance and all of their whatever, that they didn't, in fact, they had no way of really they had no capacity to own the whole deal, like what the reality and truth and energetic and spiritual universe held. That and I always read that and took that as they sort of recognized and owned their own channels, like what each one of them saw and brought. But ultimately, from a you know, a place of non-proprietariness, like this isn't about me, and it's just like a piece. It's not everything, and it's not you know, all-knowing, all-being, and that always seemed to be a common theme.
The perspective with which these people express those limitations adds a whole grandeur and magnificence to our understanding versus, let's say, just said by someone else like me or the layperson on the street, is that they can glimpse deep into areas of the universe and science and atom and whatever, and still see these really, really wonderful phenomena and share them with us. That's what's cool. It still expands, even though the words are similar.
You know, Sam, what strikes me when you get a renowned scientist like Einstein or someone who's really, really studied, and they glimpse these spiritual insights, what always amazes me is their flexibility of mind, that they haven't been trapped inside their specialty, that they've been able to take everything that they've learned about theoretical physics or quantum mechanics and yet step outside of it and see a greater whole, which doesn't always happen. In fact, it's rare. And I think that's why maybe it's so amazing to hear Carl Sagan and all the people you named say these things, because there's this recognition, like if he or she can see that, then I'm not, and I'm feeling that and I'm seeing it, then I'm not wrong either. And there's validation in that, because this person has a much greater platform than little old me. But they're seeing the same thing I'm seeing, and there's like a validation, or it challenges you to see what they're seeing, and that's great too.
I don't feel so comfortable with quoting all these people who have achieved amazing levels of understanding scientifically or in different areas, and then being impressed with their insights. There's something about it which it's to do with our culture and this sort of celebrity culture and the way we quote things, and somehow that we need that validation, because where we started with this group was really feeling the potential that we have here in this group with us little old beings somehow able to experience something quite deep here, and realizing how powerful it can be. Yes, Sam.
The immediacy of the potential, I think I agree with. But we are all here because of what has taken place and put us here. You know, our parents did things, they taught us things. We experience various teachings and we bring that here. We're able to feed ourselves, therefore we're not hungry and don't have to depart at this very moment. You know, I'm wearing clothes because, you know, it's keeping me warm rather than me shivering and going someplace else at the moment. So everything that has brought me here, I acknowledge and respect and thank, including the teachings from our ancestors, which shape the thought in each of our minds that we bring to this particular engagement. So to not value that, to just say, oh, it's just us here in the present and now, isn't adequately looking at the perspective of what has brought us here. And to thank those who have come before us, and to use their artifacts as best we can, and to basically respect them and learn from them, and then bring the best of that to what we are here right now, this very moment. So in a sense, I'm saying, yes, I disagree with you, Anna. I think that we are here with plenty of potential, but it's in appreciation of what has put us here. Over.
Yeah, I posted a couple of links.
Go on.
Yeah, I posted a couple of links, including a quote from Doug Engelbart's 1962 paper, but he talks about as we have developed capabilities that it unleashes this latency that's been in the system and things. And there's other people have talked about, I mean, just, we have, just the capabilities that we have right now that basically anybody in the world can talk to anybody else in the world. And that's unleashing a whole thing. So, I think that's part of this, that people who have had these ideas have been isolated, but now they're finding each other, and they're like, and there is, like people are saying, they like resonate with each other, like, and it's amazing. Like I go to conference, I just went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and there was one woman who was in every session with me. So it was like we were talking about, it's like we're on like resonant frequencies or whatever. But and then I also posted a link. There was an amazing series that was done in the early 90s. The first one had the Dalai Lama and David Bohm talking about from fragmentation to wholeness, but there's like 5 of those, and it's they're purposely bringing scientists, spiritual leaders, artists, and economists into panels. So there was five panels and stuff. So it's I put a link to the first one there.
Yeah,
Well,
that's great.
Sam, I think I agree with you, we probably wouldn't agree about this. I think everybody's experience is different. How much I feel that what is happening now is a direct expression of a power which is actually supporting us in this way. Yes, you can point to the people that have, but they also were supported in that same way. So my respect would go to that power, which I feel a very direct connection in myself. And I don't feel the need to respect all the individuals who have been, goodness, the grandmothers and the great grandmothers and all of that, who were the people who have actually allowed this all to be. Yes, goes back millennia, but for me, the power which is enabling it to happen is inside me, and that is where I can respect it and experience it.
One thing to that, Anna, because I really liked what you said also earlier about how even if we have these different chromosomal structures, we actually don't know how that needs to be expressed, how it could be expressed, and there's every reason to question that. And this seems to bring to mind our relationship with the past and the present. And when I heard your interaction with Sam there, it reminded me of one that you had earlier where this question also came up. And as I heard a point Sam made, which I find very interesting, is how in some sense the past is here with us in the present, and sometimes we may be here in the present talking about the past in the present, and then of course there's the danger of getting lost in that, but to that example of these quotes, what I found really interesting was that there was a few quotes from these different celebrities, with all of that included, but it does represent a way of thinking which many people resonate with, otherwise they wouldn't be celebrities. So there is something interesting there which is a part of our culture, but there was also something more specific here, and that is that a great deal of these traditional categories which have been portrayed as being oppositional, we may actually see that in their foundations they share the exact same convictions. And if we take, for example, spirituality and science, which is often seen as being contradictory, as far as I can tell, and that's what these examples show, is that in its foundations, they are both about a direct perception of reality. Mindfulness, empiricism, it's the same thing. It's the reality which actually happens. And it's the challenging of the subjective ideas of what I think might happen or what I think should happen, and the challenging of that limitation of our subjective assumptions. So it's the virtue of humility, of openness, of being ready to learn. These are great scientific values. These are great spiritual and religious values. And I maybe will even make that strong claim. The entire conflict is false. They are expressions of the one and same fundamental wish to be more conscious, to be more in contact with reality, to develop ourselves. And they are expressions of a deeper evolutionary impulse. And if this is true, then that means that many of the conflicts in society have been totally unnecessary between people who actually want the same thing, who share the same values. And the political left and the political right is another example. I think those categories are collapsing.
For me, if I may step in, there was kind of an epiphany when I with Ken Wilber, to distinguish that at the same time there is the relativeness, or how is the word, and the absolute at the same time. So we are living in this time and space frame to have that 3D world in which we have a past and a future, and we develop in a relative, so from one stage to another. from one teaching to the next one or so. And at the same time, what you said, Anna, or what we are talking about, to have connection to that absolute, to the causal frame, or the source, the Tao, the whatever, and to live both, to be in this 3D world, doing the things sequentially, and being connected to that source. I think that's a challenge, and at the same time, it's something. When I had that distinction between, so we are developing, and I'm developing personal development and things like that, and on every level, wherever I am, I can tap into this absolute. And so that connection is eternal. It's that, so I can somehow take the best from both sides, from both realities, and but not being trapped in this 3D part, and not being just in the causal, just feeling, but being able to act as well. So for me, this was like, oh my God. I always thought this absolute is on top. So you have to develop in order that you can be enlightened, or, you know, and this is like, it's always there. And so I can be in this gross field, in the more subtle field, or in the causal, or even in the witness, or in the universal or unified consciousness. But it's not. So, yeah, my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's pretty multidimensional, really. I was feeling into, I just want to share a little story from my earlier life, from my childhood. My family bought 100 acres on the top of a mountain and homesteaded for 4 years. And a couple of years prior to that, there was no media. And when we were on the mountain, the only media we had was Billy Graham on Sundays, sometimes when we couldn't go to church. But that changed the relationship that I had in that fundamental formative age. That was between 7 and 13. And so I didn't have that sort of down pressing of the cultural meme in the same way as my peers. And I'm curious about, Gertrude, in you talking about all of these different ways that we can experience consciousness, in a sense. There's the external that's pressed towards us. How do we choose to focus our attention? And that's, for me, part of what the explorations here are pointing my attention towards is, how do we choose to take information, take experience and share insights, experience, point out our assumptions, or that which we bring in with us, which we can't help but, because we do have a constellation of experience that forms our identity. And how can we make choices? And how do we make choices in terms of what our focus of attention is, what it is that we choose to pick up and run with, what it is we choose to share or hear, right? And I think there's a rich field in there to reassess, reconsider, reconceptualize, and, you know, challenge. What do we choose to focus our attention on? And what is it that we're bringing in? You know, I really appreciate this exercise, Doug, of leave some stuff behind and see if there's a bit more space to be able to choose the focus of our time and attention differently, so that we can have an experience of a group field and the us of us in a different way that we all co-steward. You know, this sort of peer perspective, as Sam might say, or this peer-to-peer guidance and leadership. You know, I'm speaking now, and then I will listen and receive, and you know, this kind of functional focusing is, I don't know, I just find it's incredibly powerful. And I think there's richness because it's balanced on that present moment, on top of the ball that Deborah was talking about, of, you know, being, you know, we're in this present moment trying to co-guide how we understand each other right now. And I'm grateful to be here. And it's also like, there's a part of it that's scary because we don't know where it's going to go. Right. And anything can come. Right. And I think that our ways that we understand the world allow us to have some safety around what we might expect. And we're kind of consciously walking into that space where that safety of knowing what might be is no longer there. And how can we make that safe for each other to have our different experiences, to be able to bring them, to be able to challenge and test assumptions, and choose to leave some of those things behind, or have a current generative insight that helps to transform that energy into something else that is of value for all of us to learn on many different levels. Yeah.
Go ahead, Gertrude.
No, I just wanted to say one sentence. You said, how do we do it? I think what we do is how we do it also. One way, just to practice what we want to have in our lives. So this is one of the reasons why we meet, to get that, to get a feeling of it. And it doesn't mean that we are always perfect with it, but yeah, I think that's one of the house. And maybe a personal practice for ourselves in between.
So I think this, what I'm reading out of all this, especially what just Tammy just said, is how do we together, if we want to, leverage each of our personal gifts or skills or insights to the benefit of the community. And I think one of the things that to me appears to be a blocker in that is this statement, we are all equal. There are many ways in which that is, of course, to be taken as a guiding principle, and it's that's true. But in many senses, it is not. You know, some of us focus our energy on other things, focus, you know, more or less energy across the spectrum. Some of us go deep dive into another. And to recognize that, well, if we want to achieve something together, and again, I agree, that's a big if. But even if we want to be something together, we should recognize that this we are all equal has a nuance that I think is worth double clicking on rather than just accepting at face value. And the reason I'll extrapolate a little bit on that is that this we are all equal principle applied to decision-making in groups, i.e. democracy, has led us to where we are, where the biggest group in the middle has chosen, almost by definition, a non-optimal executive or representative or whatever it is. They're never going to select the best in whatever notion the best can be ever conceived. Because the people thinking at the boundaries, the people really pushing our understanding of what is possible, are not the people in the middle of the bell curve. They're not the people in the mass of that spectrum. They're people on the edges. And if we want to get the gifts from those people at the, p equals 0.5 or, whatever that the tail is at the extreme, those people are not going to be necessarily accepted or understood by the people who vote the majority. So democracies, and you can look this up, democracies and one-to-one voting is, guaranteed not to produce a quote-unquote best result of any kind. If we want that inclusion, then we should be prepared to accept that consequence, i.e. someone like a Donald Trump, something like Brexit. But if we want better, then we need to have those people who have those other insights, not necessarily in the norm. We've got to have the Giordano Brunos, the people that get persecuted, killed for their insights. We have to bring them into our consideration well. Otherwise, we're doing the persecution. And then we're going to live with what that brings us, which is a non-optimal result. And over time, this degenerates the community and society. So we must recognize these differences in gifts, insights, skill sets, time, attention, mental models, structures, teachings, learnings. And this is part of doing human beings differently, okay? Voting has got us to where we are. That's human beings doing us now. We've got to do it differently. Over.
I'm just curious, where did the "we are all equal" meme come from? I mean, I never gave voice to that. I was just curious.
No, I'm not saying it's you, Doug. I'm saying it's the democratic model in which we live. It's this, one person, one vote notion.
Yeah, my orientation around just even on sort of a foundational languaging basis, this concept of equality is really, culturally just loaded. It's got this Mount Everest of stuff stirred into it in the eye of the beholder and all of that stuff. And so, in my construct, it's not something that even gets invited to the party. Like, it doesn't add anything. It doesn't bring value in my mind. I think unpacking, are there any parts or ingredients attached to it or that could be, distilled out of it that might inform and that might be of value? I think it's pieces that relate to inclusion and valuing and respect and acknowledgement on a human being level. And really, I think more on a values level, but doesn't presume or require any sort of relative judgment or validation of what any one individual can or in fact does bring. It's just recognizing that everybody has the generative ability and potential to bring something. And so, I'm complete. I'll stop there. But you know, my feeling is if we don't want to invite it to the party, then that's not, you know, something we give energy to or make part of the conversation. It's just not, you know, not part of what we are looking to generate or enact or create.
Can I just jump in with a, I'd like to break equal into the alphabet code. The purpose of the alphabet code is to really look at, okay, what could that mean if we take a different lens? So equal in the alphabet code is the energy of questioning or the quest, containing all that is counseling and informing. The energy of our quest containing all that is counseling or informing. So there's this long tail that you speak of, Sam, in a reality sense of each one of us having a contribution that is going into the whole. As a quest, we don't know. It's not an equal sign. I mean, the challenge with equal is that it's on a hierarchy. Mine is better, yours is worse. It's through the frame of a value judgment lens that everyone is gonna, as Doug says, eye of the beholder. But it's interesting what it points to in the alphabet code for me, because it is about, we're going in that direction. We don't know how that's held and how that informs the system exactly. We do know that it's that equality has been out of balance. So it is a core, you know, concern and question, and something that we want to do differently. Sorry, Anna, you did have your hand up.
No, I've only just put it up. So I'm really glad that Sam has brought this up. I really feel this is the nub of a lot of differences that I feel with Sam. So this is absolutely pinpointing exactly what needs to be somehow unpacked and looked at in more detail. And the first thing that I would question is whether, you say, the situation that we are now in is because we have been seeing people as equal, that one person, one vote. But the voting system is a very minimal part of what people, how the whole society is conducted. And in fact, even that is really quite recent. So, you know, I think if we were just to look at where we are, for me, it would be a lack of equality. But then I don't want to use that term, because I agree with Doug that equality has so much packed into it that it isn't a useful term. But yet there is something here which I can see is really important to really look at and bring out into the open. Yeah, I don't know what it is yet, but I think if we talk about it, it will, yeah, I'm over.
I know others had to jump in, but I have to hop off the call in just a few minutes. So I just wanted to flag that. I've got maybe 4 or 5 minutes that I can remain.
I just have a short remark just on riffing on this theme of equality. And I'm also really glad you brought it up. And it seems to me that that's well in tune with this theme of unblocking. Since it really is a culturally infused concept. That kind of goes back to this point of the reality of it again. because my impression is that this idea of equality is a very important idea in society today. Many people talk about it, many people think about it, myself included, have strong opinions about it, and especially important, as Doug pointed out, understand it very, very differently, which leads us to speak past one another. For example, just to mention two very simple aspects of it, you have equality and differences of abilities as a starting point, what we mentioned earlier, and also resulting from where you happen to have been born, what experience you've happened to accumulate, etc. And this was a point Neil Davidson also made, that in these collaborative processes, people will have different skills. Some are really good at programming, some are fantastic at interviewing people, some are more system thinkers of sorts, some are connectors, some maybe bring a sort of lightheartedness to it, a sort of playfulness. There can be many, many different talents that we have. So in that sense, there's obviously differences, just like with the chromosomes. I mean, it's not even debatable that there's genetical differences between people, and that's the way nature works. It's the way it's always worked. And then at the same time, this idea of equality, there's this idea of equality of value, that we have an equal worth, that there isn't this sort of hierarchy where some are better than others. That's a very different idea of equality, which I support a great deal. But I would see it in terms also of potential, because if we all have unlimited generative potential, then in one sense we are all equal, because we are all potentially unlimited. So that's also another interesting aspect of it. And I think that this idea equality is a really great example of a meme in culture people care very strongly about. There's all kinds of different opinions about it. And if we can unpack that, like we've done to some extent just in this conversation, that seems like a part of the unblocking process. So I'm actually really glad that was brought up, because it really fits in with the rest of what we've been talking about here.
I get triggered a little bit here when in this discussion of equality, there's this different but equal notion, what sounds like separate but equal. And yes, it's triggering, but even I am saying we are all different. Over.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop off, but there's something that's really exciting that's being explored and born and expressing here, and the thing is that we try and boil these things down into these frameworks, binaries, these ways to make it really clear. But the truth is that the complexity of what it is that we're in is, we can do our best to translate it. And every time we do, someone's going to put their hand up and say, wait, I didn't hear it that way. Or there's another piece that needs to be fed in here. And that's the beauty of this. And it's uncomfortable. It is, because we have to say, oh, what do I actually believe there? What am I holding on to? It's rich, and it's felt, and yeah, Gertrude.
I'm just thinking what comes to my mind is more like being on eye level, having the same fundamental value, not trying to make everybody the same, equalizing everything, and like having all the same skin color, having all the same skills, having all the same whatever. But having that fundamental right to get the same pay, to be equally valued, more in that sense, meeting each other on eye level, no matter where we come from, and so that's more when I hear. So I don't particularly like that word equality in the way that is used often. But coming from the French Revolution, égalité, that was such a big achievement to say we are brothers, or sisters was not so much at that time, but this is where I think there's this first time not to have these differences in value of people, and so connecting to that's great, but not to equalize our differences, because if they are all valued, they feed into the whole and help us create something that is a lot bigger than just my framework that should be equal with everybody else. So
yeah, a couple of people had brought up the potential and things, and then the other thing I hadn't heard people talk about is the opportunity to realize that potential. So I think that's kind of part of it. And then, yeah, I do have to sign off too, but some of the conversation, it's like we're all unique, just like everybody else.
Do you know the new revelations from Neil Walsh? Everybody is special, unique, whatever, like everybody else. That's the first revelation.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll see you next week probably. Sundays are better for me. Thursdays are like my meeting day, so.
Even though he may no longer be in favor in Lake Wobegon, it's like the saying, where all the children are above average.
So Sam, you said there was something triggering about.
Yeah, I mean, this whole phrase, separate but equal, really was the whole politicization of segregation, in the South, in the United States. So that phrase, separate but equal, just mirrors this different but equal notion. And it's a very, as Doug was using the word, packed phrase. Very packed. But I'm going to go on a limb one more time here, as I'm kind of want to do, and suggest a possible differentiation between what we're doing here on Sundays versus what we might want to do on Tuesdays, which is, this is very valuable to sort of see where we are talking past each other and really go down deep and try to unblock, from a fundamental notion. It could be the stance or the position shift on Tuesdays, that where we see differences and whatever, we're looking for those possible agreements, not those possible blocks, so that we can actually build on things, while on Sundays we're actually unpacking the blocking and working the foundational things and making sure all the concrete is set correctly. But on Tuesdays we're looking at the potential design of things and what could be. So I'm just kind of in my mind playing with that distinction between Sundays and Tuesdays. Over.
There's in that distinction, and very much grist for here as opposed to there, is there a sort of Gestalt level shift or trim tab that we could sort of make explicit or express or explore that has to do with the frame or value from which a desire to show and tell, a desire to share, a desire to contribute on an individual basis can be sort of reframed, recontextualized, so that it loses the industrial baggage imprint quality that gets in the way of somebody receiving it. That, you know, that eliminates the feeling of either a push or a sale or an imposition. Because I think as much as we're programmed in a system that's set up for push, we're also programmed to be reactive to push even when it's not push, right? It's sort of like, you know, if everything, you know, if I'm a hammer, everything's a nail. So there's sort of a negative space piece to this, which is what's my decision point as listener audience around that specific context use case? You're sharing with me, fill in the blank. What are the ingredients of that to take it out of old paradigm, to reframe, recontextualized as generative contribution on a resonant, experiential, one-to-collective basis? Because I got to get what you're offering. It's important for me to get what you've got. I think almost as important, or equivalency, great word to invoke now. Irony of all that. But I'm as motivated to get what you have to share and offer and contribute as you are to share it. But we've got this meta layer of reflexes, of emotional responsiveness that almost has nothing to do, we're not choosing it, it's something that's evoked. It's truly a button in a Sunday context, right? That culturally we're just, you know, thanks, I don't want any. Call your next lead. I'm complete.
At the risk of hogging the conversation, I'll just add 20 seconds here. Doug, I'm actually personally a little bit surprised that is an issue, because I think of the people who were in the discussion about how we constitute the Tuesday conversations, I saw that curiosity. I saw that generosity. I saw that willingness to really listen versus just push. So I didn't actually get that sense that we're all there trying to push these things. And I think if we, and I actually very much agree with you, you know, if we want to just use this as a guiding principle for Tuesdays to say, hey, we're going to come up here on Tuesdays with a generous ability to receive as well as to share. I think that's it. And if it doesn't happen, we bring it to Sundays and say, why didn't it happen? You know, let's go see Dr. Doug, okay?
Yeah, and by the way, I wasn't suggesting that we experienced that on Tuesday. It's the bigger meta question, and part of our inquiry, you know, across all of our sessions, how do we do us differently? I think that's a big deal out there, like on a macro level of there are a lot of people with a lot to offer, and on an almost programmatic level, the only channels are push framed. And I think we're evolving and enacting an alternative to that, where it's not a contextualized, hardened up selling channel. It's not LinkedIn. You know what I mean? It's not whatever. It's, I think that's part of what we're evolving. And I think this Sunday part of that is, what are the triggers for that reactivity?
Yeah.
And frankly, on sort of a practice and protocol level, are there things to be made explicit to sort of round those things off or head those things off at the pass or take them off the table in service to really increasing the sharing and the ability to give and receive? So, complete.
I don't really get the connection, Doug, between what you're saying now about this push and pull and the original thing that Sam said, which started off this whole conversation about equality. So if there is a connection, but I really want to go back. I don't want to lose this place where we were, where Sam was expressing something which seemed to me really important, because it's not, I've heard this feeling expressed several times, not just Sam, but other people. There's so much in it about maybe not trusting people or not having the... I feel that I'll come back to me.
Sam, could you just mute while you're typing? We're getting both. Thanks. I'm sorry. Sorry, Anna.
My passion for inclusivity is, I feel, not based on what it can produce. It's not based on a result. It's based on a feeling of the necessity of giving value to each person. So if that is questioned, then let's look at what is questioning it. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to riff a little bit on that theme, because you asked this question, Doug, about how we can reframe the situation of sharing and sort of put some of that baggage behind of a lot of these sort of pushy marketing ad environments or whatever. And now you ask this question about how this relates to equality. Well, and value, each person being valued. And the first thing which came into my mind when you first asked that, Doug, about reframing it was, well, I could probably reframe it in some theoretical way, but I didn't really know how at that moment. And then the next moment it came to me, but that's just a waste of time because we're actually doing it here. We're actually doing the reframing here. And then it simply occurred to me my own experience from having these conversations. And that is that there is such a joy in being able to just listen and learn from all of these great minds from different parts of the world and these various perspectives. And just by sitting here and just soaking it in, it is immensely valuable for me, for all of my interests in how I express my own ideas. I get loads of different formulations, slight improvements, as I see it, improvements. All of you have brought things which I would see as an improvement on my present point of view. So my present point of view is evolving. And then if I'm sharing and the room is listening, then I'm trying to express a point of view which might be expressed even better later, whatever that might mean, but there is learning in this process. So we have already created a room where we are reframing this, and as you said, Sam, in these Tuesday conversations we've experienced, there's a real interest, there's a real enthusiasm in trying to understand what you really mean by that. What is your point of view? What to dig deeper, and it's interesting in so many ways. And to have that process, which I feel we've already begun, and we can go do far more with it, but that process itself is a reframing of this traditional paradigm. And if we can find that kind of space where everyone's contributions are valued, and where the attitude is that we're really valuing what is actually in the room, what's actually being shared, and then that does for me connect to equality in the great sense that we all have an equal value, and it's equal in the sense that it's unlimited. It's equally unlimited. And that's when we bring in potential, because all of this is stepping stones in a journey, and later we review it, we look at it. So this isn't any finished product, it's all stepping stones. And in that evolutionary journey, we can say that each contribution is equally valuable in the sense that they are infinitely potentially valuable. So,
Glenn, can I just add to what you just said? And maybe this is a process of reframing. So equally value, totally get it. Let's look at what we're doing as this life form again. And if one piece, I mean, there's many different things that go into a body, and it all needs to work together and stay in balance, or that body dies. So yeah, that probably, like, the heart is going to be really important, and we might put a tremendous value on the heart. And I don't know enough about microbiology, but there's smaller processes, there's smaller things that is part of this larger being, which I think is what we're creating here, that are just as important. And if they get out of whack, even they're a teeny tiny little thing, and we might not ascribe much value to them, and we certainly wouldn't say they're equal to the heart. But if we put them so far out of balance and they start to die, the whole being is going to die. So, so I think there's room for inequality, but there's still room for equal value and appreciation for the balance that is absolutely necessary for life to exist. And I think that's what we're trying to find here, is what is all our parts, even if it's a teeny tiny little microscopic piece to the bigger thing that we're creating, this network, this net of consciousness. and how do and we're trying to figure out where we all fit. And every contribution, the more pieces that get put into it, we all are needed in this, because like everyone said, we are going over this cliff, and we need everybody to find their voices and to find their value and to find the piece that they fit into, even if it's teeny microscopic piece, or it's the heart, or it's the head, or I don't know what. But we need to save this being that we all are part of. But I love what you said.
Thank you, Deborah. This is really, yeah, I love it. It's very much resonating with me, and it reminds me of a story that I've been told somewhere about a monk who was enlightened and had the chance to
You are muted.
Can't hear.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was
You said
thrown
a
out
monk.
for sorry.
A
And this
monk
monk got the chance to go in, and then he said, no, I won't, because I'm not complete as long as somebody else some human being is not, or some being enlightened and complete for himself or herself. Sorry, English, but just this I'm happy for what I have here, and leave the rest out, and thinking that doesn't work. So that's, and it's hard. I mean, our daily normal life gives us the illusion we are not connected, or we can do our little thing here, and well, but on the other hand, being connected to this, we are all connected, and I'm not complete unless the others are complete. This is almost overwhelming. It's like, how can I live that every day? So, yeah. This. And I need to go soon.
So just as a check-in, it's 1:34. So we're at a little over 2.5 hours, which is probably enough, maybe. So I'd like to invite sort of wrap-ups, but Gertrude, I resonate with what you just shared, and I, firmly believe none of us. And if the principle is we've got to, take care of each other and all, which includes the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between, then, time to get busy. We've got a lot of work to do to figure out how to do that. And with that, I'm complete.
I'll go. So if I riff on Deborah's metaphor, that we're all components or organs of this larger being, which arguably is not yet really accepted, then I think that kind of brings to light that differentiation meme that I was trying to introduce. And that vis-a-vis the equality meme. So yes, there is a lot to unpack there. And the worth of human beings is clearly something I don't believe is wrapped up in their skill set or experience or et cetera, et cetera. But to recognize that they have contribution differences and how we recognize that, I think is very rich. That's an area I think that we could actually talk about quite a bit. And I don't want to invite any distinction, any implication that it's about equality as human beings of value, okay? It's not about that at all. It's how do we bring forth that which can then serve the community if we really want that organism to survive, that to be resilient, to thrive. And I really think that that's a fruitful discussion that I think we could still continue in a different light. And how we make these models work or make these distinctions even discussable is a question, because we haven't yet shared these things other than in the form of these videos. I've been sharing other things in other forms. I'm willing to take a crack at some of these ideas. But it's also the case that, in some different organs, different skill sets obviously will be expressed, and in certain other organs, others won't. So I think part of what we're looking at is how do we form those organs with those who actually can have those functions within that organ, and then have others perform that function in other organs without each other getting in the way. And that is a big unblocking question as well. And I'll stop there for today.
I completely see what you're saying, Sam. And I love what Doug said, and Gertrude and Glenn and Anna. And I just feel incredibly encouraged. I really, like I said on Friday, I feel like I've been floating on the sea of unconsciousness with lots of icebergs. And I've only been in this group for 2 weeks, but I feel like it's been infused with tropical warm water. And I just feel so energized and rejuvenated and encouraged to keep doing what I'm doing. And then within this group, like what you're saying, Sam, to find my place, even if it's a teeny little place. I'm totally on board with that. I don't mind having a little task because we're all doing other things on multi levels, and it goes back and forth. Another image that I see is the infinity image, and the flow, and it is our job to help each other unblock that flow and to keep that energy flowing around and around so that we can all do our best work and lift each other up. And when that flow gets blocked, it's the yin and yang balance gets blocked, helping each other unblock that so that we can all help whatever it is we're building here, this being, this living creature, this network, this brain, this external brain, to help it be as strong as it needs to be. Because when the time comes, and it's going to come soon, it may be the only thing that holds this world together. What I really just believe, whatever we're creating here might be the only thing that holds this world together. I don't know. We'll see. So that's my takeaway.
I just wanted to
like to go next.
Sorry?
It's okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Both
okay.
Anna and Gertrude are speaking, so would Gertrude like to go first?
Maybe. And I go ahead, it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, you're telling me to go ahead now. Okay, I was just going to make a little comment about this story about, all of us or none of us. I don't think it's quite as clear cut as that, because there is some sort of a paradoxical way that I can experience the perfection of being in this moment, even with the knowledge that there are people out there who are living on the street, and all of that is still going on. The two don't cancel each other out. That's what it feels like to me. Yeah, it is part of my sphere of being, that those people enter into my consciousness and need caring for and looking after. But at the same time, I can also experience the reality of me, which is totally wonderful and unique and real, and feels like it's complete and doesn't need anything else. So it is, I think it's something to do with experiencing these paradoxes within us, which appear to be totally in conflict, but actually within a person, they exist side by side. And that's what I leave this meeting with. It's just been really enjoyable and wonderful, and thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you as well. I missed the first part. Sorry for that. I brought my daughter to the train. And I think when I let go of either or, one can be true or the other, then life is easy. Then it can be at the same time that, like Deborah said, maybe that's the what is counting, and life depends on what we are doing, and really being aware that every moment counts. And on the other side, seeing the perfection in everything and being relaxed, on not having that sense of urgency, but what could be that word? This, like, responsibility, responsibility, and so both being in centered, being in this moment, because there is only that moment, and on the same time have out of this having these impulses what I'm here for, and to do what's necessary, and what I think nobody else can do. Not in a sense the others are not able, but it's like my expression in the world. Yeah, so thank you for this light and deep conversation. And I will not be here on Thursday because we are doing our appreciative inquiry process, and that is one of the things I had on my mind the whole time from the conversation, to maybe do it ourselves, just going with the whole potential, and then creating or sensing the future and bringing that into action. So I will do 3 days of that, and then I will tell you about it and share, and then we can see, maybe I can just bring that in, because I just love that process. So. Yeah, thanks again. It's great to see you all, and it's very nice to see you, Deborah. It was a joy meeting you first time.
Yes, same here. I'm meeting so many new people, and I'm just loving everybody. I think Tammy and Sam and everyone has talked about the importance of love. I think that is our glue, that is our gravity that holds us together. Even when we do stuff that is uncomfortable, when we do it with love and curiosity and respect, then it's not impossible. So, but wonderful to meet you.
Just for my feeling, where are you located?
Oh, I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm right next to Trump. I'm in Arlington now. I'm a little bit away. I'm not right in the district, thankfully. But yes, I'm really close to the epicenter here.
Okay, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Carl is in Washington, D.C. also, Deb.
Oh, who is?
Carl Hebens,
Carl.
who was here earlier.
I don't think I've met him. Have I met him yet?
He was in this call today, Carl.
Oh, Carl. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I don't think he said that, but I just wanted to let you know. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Okay. All right.
And he's working for the government, by the way.
Oh, okay. We need good people in the government.
I think that Glenn didn't share yet. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I'll just check out briefly. Yeah, I really. Hey, Harry, you came just when we're checking out.
Yeah, Harry, would you like to check out now?
Yeah, please. Well, you're a human being. I was human doing.
Shame on you.
Well, I found out they're intertwined. With that, I'm in and I'm out again.
Hello, goodbye. So, yeah. I just feel like we're all we all come from different places, and we're all bringing gifts, and it's like this whole load of these amazing gifts that every person brings to the conversation, and then seeing them together and comparing them, there's this growth process, and something happens. I don't even know what it is, but I can feel that it's happening. And like for me today, when Doug mentioned this in the beginning about the ideas that we come with and that we're attached to, and whether we can see that attachment, then during the conversation, many of these ideas have come up, and we're questioning them from different angles. And it's this room where it's like we open a space around these attachments, so they don't disappear. They don't need to disappear, just like the ego doesn't need to disappear. It's just here, but it's like the space is just opening around it, and you can see it like from a bird's perspective, and you see it a little differently than you did earlier. And that's how it's been for me today, and that's what I feel these conversations help, because just the fact that all of us, we see all these different faces of different people who are present together, thinking together, learning together, then just that very presence itself brings this meta perspective. And that is a process of unblocking, which is happening. And I totally love it. So thanks to everyone. I mean, it's just been gold, everything that everyone is bringing here. Yeah.
Harry, you want to give us any parting words?
What was the question?
Do you want to give us any parting words? I think you're the last to.
Yeah, how would you recap the conversation, Harry?
it's so good to be together, and there's something emerging that we don't really know what it is, but we love the process, and we kind of start trusting each other, although we have totally different fantasies about our common future.
Perfect.
Well, same as it ever was.
And on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for being here, but also for bringing your trust and taking your chances and being willing to get risky and you know, co-creating what we're co-creating.
Thank you, Doug.
I think it's really terrific. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day or night or whatever.
Bye-bye.
Bye.